When you think of Portugal, what comes to mind? Probably sunny beaches, right? Beautiful historic cities, that amazing relaxed lifestyle. But for the people who actually live there, that paradise, well, it's starting to feel more like a prison. Today, we're going to dive deep into the really complex crisis that has made living in Portugal almost impossible for its own citizens.
Okay, let's just start with one number, a really staggering number, 250%. That's how much housing prices in Lisbon have shot up, on average, in less than a decade. It's a figure that's at the heart of so much of the anger and desperation we're about to unpack. And all that frustration, it has absolutely boiled over. We're talking some of the biggest protests the country has seen in a long, long time. But what's really fascinating here is who people are angry at. It's not just the government they're targeting. No, it's tourists and wealthy foreigners, who a lot of locals now see as the root of the problem. So what is the real story here? I mean, it's super easy to point the finger at tourism or foreign buyers, but honestly, those are just symptoms of a much, much deeper issue, a crisis that's been decades in the making and could honestly define the entire future of the nation. So to really get what's happening, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to go back in time and explore how Portugal's paradise was lost, starting with the pretty fragile foundation its modern economy was built on in the first place.
Yeah, this timeline pretty much shows you exactly how the dominoes were all set up to fall. You see, back in 1974, Portugal comes out of a long dictatorship and basically has to build a modern economy from zero. In the 90s, they go all in on tourism. Then, bam, the 2008 crisis just devastates them. And in response, in 2012, they roll out a policy that would change everything, the golden visa. And this is really the key thing you need to grasp. Unlike other European countries, think Germany or France, Portugal, after its dictatorship, never really managed to build a solid industrial backbone with lots of high-paying jobs and things like advanced manufacturing. So instead of that, the focus shifted almost completely to a service economy. And tourism, it was pushed aggressively as the main engine for growth. It quickly became the fastest-growing industry. Get this, in just 5 short years, the money from tourism almost doubled. The country was flooded with cash, but it also became incredibly dependent on this one single sector.
All right, section 2. This is where we see how this over-reliance created what you could call a tourism time bomb. Just look at the size of that slice of the pie. Right now, tourism makes up nearly 20% of Portugal's entire economic output. That is a huge, and as we're about to see, a dangerously high level of dependence.
And this comparison really puts it into perspective. You look at its neighbors, Spain and France, I mean, these are massive tourism hubs themselves. And Portugal's reliance is it's way higher. It's really in a league of its own.
And you know, there's this quote from our source material that just nails it perfectly. This economic model, yeah, it looked profitable on the surface, but it was slowly building a ticking time bomb, making the country incredibly vulnerable. And that bomb was about to go off.
And that ticking time bomb brings us right to our third section, golden visas, golden cages. This is the part of the story where the government's desperate solution to the 2008 crisis ended up pouring pure gasoline on an already smoldering fire. So the 2008 global financial crisis hit Portugal like a brick wall. The tourism and construction sectors just collapsed. The country was forced to take a massive 78 billion euro bailout. I mean, they were just desperate for cash, any cash. And that desperation led to this. In 2012, the government launches the now infamous Golden Visa. The idea was pretty simple, really. Offer residency permits to wealthy foreigners from outside the EU if they'd make a big investment in the country, and more often than not, that meant buying property. And did it work? Well, from one perspective, yeah, it worked. It absolutely brought in the money. A staggering 7 billion euros flowed into Portugal directly because of this one scheme. It must have felt like a lifeline. But, and this is a huge but, here's the toxic side effect. The minimum investment for that visa was €500,000. So what happened? As this chart shows, the number of properties sold for exactly that price shot up by 60%. This one rule basically warped the entire real estate market from the top down. Okay, but it wasn't just the visa. The problem was actually much, much bigger. Which brings us to section 4, and the question, has Portugal basically become a nation for sale?
People talk about a perfect storm. Well, this is pretty much the definition of it. On one hand, you've got incredibly low rates of new home construction, all tangled up in complicated regulations, so supply is tight. Then, at the very same time, you have this massive explosion in demand from tourists and foreign buyers. The result was, well, it was inevitable. Prices just went through the roof.
And listen, it wasn't just apartments and villas being sold off. We're talking about major national companies, absolute pillars of the Portuguese economy. Their largest insurance company, their main energy provider, a top construction firm, all sold off, with controlling stakes now in the hands of foreign corporations.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that it created this one-way fire hose of wealth out of Portugal. Profits that used to circulate inside the country, benefiting local communities, are now flowing outward to international shareholders in boardrooms thousands of miles away.
And all of these economic decisions and policies, it leads us to our final and frankly most devastating section. It's about the human cost, a future on hold.
Okay, just look at these numbers. This table lays out the brutal, day-to-day reality. The national minimum wage is just 840 euros a month, but the average rent for a simple one-bedroom apartment in a big city is 1,100 euros. The math, it just doesn't add up. It's impossible. And at the same time, the government is rolling out new visas for digital nomads that require a minimum income of 2,800 euros a month, basically creating two different Portugals.
And here it is. This is the ultimate heartbreaking consequence of it all, a full-blown demographic crisis. The birth rate has plummeted to one of the lowest in the entire world. The country's population is actually shrinking. More than half of young adults are trapped, still living with their parents. And because of all this, you have a whole generation of young, talented people just packing their bags and leaving, searching for a future they know they can't find at home.
So all of this brings us back to one final, really crucial question. Portugal is still sold to the world as this affordable paradise, this perfect place for tourists and remote workers. But when you look at the reality for the people who actually call it home, you really have to stop and ask yourself, a paradise for who exactly?